Yesterday in Thunkable, we created an app that let us do some cool things. Um, we had a spreadsheet that had information about food items that are available in a cafeteria. That included the date those foods will be served, the type of food they were, the details or description of the food, the price it costs, and then a link to a picture of that food. We pulled all that over here into Thunkable where we could see a list of the menu items that were available in the cafeteria today. You'll notice that those items are different today. That's because it automatically is pulling from the list of foods that are available today. So today we've got spicy tofu chicken noodles is different, and so is creamy mac and cheese and broccoli. So those new things are coming over automatically into our app. When I click on them, it loads up the picture, the description, and the cost. So it's still working, and because the date has changed, the app has changed automatically, all based on the queries we made within our original spreadsheet. So that's pretty cool. Today, we're going to modify it even further. Imagine you're the person running the cafeteria and you want to be able to add items to the cafeteria app. We've added this little plus button down here, and that lets you put in some details. So maybe you can add a soup. Click soup up here. Maybe it's French onion soup. You've got to put in a cost. Let's say $5. And by default, it chooses today's date, but you can click that date item and say maybe it's available for another day, but let's choose today. And the last thing you'll want to do is find an image. So I'm just going to do a Google search for French onion soup, click images, find something that looks good, right click it, copy the image address, and then I'll drop it into the image URL. And hit submit. And boom, French onion soup is on today's cafeteria options. I can click there. I can see everything about it. Just like that. It's automatically adding that data. So when we look in our spreadsheet, here it is, soup, French onion soup, $5. There's the link to the image. So let's figure out how we did this. Okay, before I start, I added some information that was automatically generated into the spreadsheet that I shared with you yesterday. We're going to delete some of that. It turns out we don't need it. It doesn't actually matter, but you'll notice I was trying to have it automatically generate the date object here for us under date by individually putting in year, month, and day, and then having it generate that by adding those cells together. It turns out we don't need to do that. And in fact, what it does is when we add a new item, it puts it all the way down here. So I'm just going to scroll back up, and you should do this too. Just go into your spreadsheet and you can delete all of these unnecessary rows. Now that it goes down to 1,000, so it's a bit boring, and you don't have to do this, but I'd recommend doing it. So I've highlighted everything but that last row. I'm just going to right click now, say delete rows 28 through 1,000, and there we go. Okay, over here in Thunkable, I'll open up my project from yesterday and let's get started. Okay, so here's our project from yesterday. We're on our main screen here. Here's our item details screen. We're going to have a third screen today where we can add items to our menu. So I'm going to go ahead and add push plus here. And we're going to rename the screen from screen 2 to something else so that we know what it's called when we're referring to it. So I'll just call it the add items screen. And we need a bunch of stuff on this screen. We need a bunch of text boxes to input things. So we need a text box that will let us input the description of the food item. We need a text box that lets us input the image URL. We need a text box that lets us input the cost of the item. We need a label. We're going to use a label for the food type. And we're going to use that in, and we're going to pair that with a data list viewer. So I'm going to drop a label in. We're going to need a calendar so we can choose the date, and that's just called date input. We're going to need a button, a submit button, and we want a back button. Okay, so that's a lot of stuff we've just dropped in here. The last thing is we need, again, a data viewer list. So I'll drop all these things in here. Then we'll rearrange things because they're kind of awkwardly placed. A data list viewer at the top, that's great. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to properly name these things, and that'll help us move them around. So let's click the button at the top. Let's make that our back button. We're going to put that at the very bottom. So let's rename it from button 2 to back button. And we'll move it all the way to the bottom. Here it is, back button, and we'll just drag it down until it gets to the bottom of the list. Then this button, we're going to change it to be our submit button. And we'll change its name up here as well. And now we'll drag it down just above the back button. I'd like a little space here between these two buttons, like we did before. So I'll click on my back button and scroll down and find margin, and I'll just put a 30 pixel, that's 300, 30 pixel margin there, just to give some space between the back button and the submit button to show that they're separate things. Okay, let's look at our calendar. We can leave that called date input. I think that's fine. Let's put that just above the submit button. Then we need, this is going to be our label. So this is the food type. So I'll go ahead and click here, and let's call that type label. And then under text, we'll just write type. This is going to be the description of our food. So let's click there and edit its name, and we'll call this one details text input. And our hint, let's say details, so people know what to type in the box. The next one is going to be the image URL. So let's come up here and change this to image text input. And our hint will be image URL. Image URL. Next, we need the cost. So we'll change this to cost. Text input. Hint. Cost. All right, so this is all set up and ready to go. Let's just go to blocks really quickly. We're going to add one piece of code. We want to say when the back button is pushed, to navigate to screen 1. Let's go to screen 1 for a minute and design. Now we need a button to add an item over here. So let's grab a button and drop it on our main screen. And I'm just going to put a plus in this. That means add an item. You could write add an item. And up here I'll rename this button to add item button. Okay, and let's make the code for that work. So I'll go to blocks here and say add item button drawer. When add item button is clicked, what do we want to do? We want to navigate to screen, not screen 1. We want to navigate to add item screen. Let's go back to design. Let's just make sure our navigation works before we do any of the other coding. So let's go to live test here. Add an item. Brings us to the right screen. All this doesn't work yet. I can type things in here. Push back, takes us back. So the navigation works. That's super. Let's write the code. Back on my add item screen, the first thing I'm going to do is click on my data viewer list at the top here. And you might wonder, why did we put that in here? Well, if you look at our spreadsheet, there's actually a food types category here, or a food type sheet that shows all the types of food that we could serve in our cafeteria. So we're going to pull from that. So back here in Thunkable, I click here. it asks for a data source. We've already defined our bistro data source, so that's super. We don't have to do that again. It's asking, hey, which sheet in the table do you want to look at? We want to look at the food types column. What do we want our list to look like? Well, we just need it to be a list of titles, so I'll click on title there. And then it wants to know which column should I look under for the titles. The column's name is food types. You can see that right here. And if we want, we can click here to view our data and make sure it all makes sense. Food types, sandwich, salad, pasta, hot option soup. Looks great. Okay. So now this will work. Let's preview it really quickly. Live test. Here it is. We've got sandwich, salad, whatever. Now in our previous screen, when we clicked these options, they would do take us somewhere. Instead, we're going to have it change the text that appears here in this label. So let's do that now. So back under blocks, we're going to look in our data viewer list 2, and we're going to say when data viewer list 2 item is clicked, what do we want to do with that? Well, we got a row ID, we know that. And we know we have a label where we want the name of the food item to appear. So let's look at our label, our type label. We want to change the text there. So we'll set the type label's text to, we don't want to change it to label. Instead, we have to use this row ID to get the data from the item we've clicked. So we're going to go to data sources and say get value from bistro. Grab that, pull it over. From bistro, that's right, not sheet 1, we want food types. And in the column food types, and which row? We just grab the row ID from the row we clicked. Let's test it out, make sure it works. Here we go. When I click hot option under food types, what happens? It's not working. Sometimes it doesn't work on the first go. No problem. Let's just make sure we've done everything right. Bistro, food types, looks good to me. Let's do another live test. Pasta. There we go. Okay, it's working. I'm not sure why it didn't work the first time. Sometimes that happens. You just run it again and it's fine. There we go. So it's changing the text in our label to whatever category of food, whatever type of food we're choosing. That's great. It's working. All right, so when someone comes to the screen, they're going to type these 3 items themselves. They're going to go ahead and choose a date, and then they're going to hit submit. So we need to write the code to make sure that we take all these things and input them directly back into our spreadsheet. So let's write that code now. So here under blocks, we're going to say, let's go for our button here. We'll say when our submit button is clicked, what do we want to happen? Well, we want to input a row back into the spreadsheet. So we're going to go to data sources here, and we can see we've got our get values from. We can update values in a certain row, but we can also create a new row. So let's do that. We'll say create a new row in our sheet, sheet 1. So all of our data goes into sheet 1 today and is updated automatically. So anytime new items are added to our little database here, it goes into sheet 1. And we can see we have these different columns of things that we have to input. So those columns automatically get pulled over here. We've got the date, the type of food, the details of the food, the picture URL, the price, and then I have separate columns for date year, date month, and date day. It turns out we don't need those, but we may as well do it anyway, seeing as they're there, just so the data is all correct. So how do we do this? Let's do the easy ones first. So food type, let's look under our type label and we'll just say, get the text that appears in type. Details is easy as well. It's in our details text input text box, and we'll say, just get not the hint. Made an error there. We don't want that to say hint. We want it to say text. So the details text input text goes there. The picture URL, easy as well. So that's going to be in our image text input, and we'll get the image text inputs text. Drop that there. Price, also easy. That's in our cost text input. I guess I should have called it price text input, but that's okay. And it turns out year, month, and day are easy as well. So let's do them just so we understand how they work. The one that's a little more complicated is this last one, the date value. We'll do that in a second. So because it requires combining all these things together or joining them together. All right, date input though. So when I look under my date input to get these items, I've got year, month, and day here. So I can just get the call date inputs year, drop that here under date year. And I can actually just right click and duplicate this and change it to get month and duplicate again and change this one to get day. The one that's a little more complicated is this last one. So when I look at my spreadsheet, you'll notice it shows year dash month dash day, but we're actually inputting it using a function, this date function. So we actually have to build the text around the date function as well. So let's do that. You can see the function starts off with equals date open bracket. So let's copy that. Go back here to Thunkable. And if we look under text, we've got a join function. We've learned about join functions before. And right now there's only 2 boxes, but that's okay. We can add more as we go. So what goes in the first box? Equals date open bracket. Instead of world in the second box, we need the year. Well, I can just duplicate that from here, plug it up there. We need more things to join. So I push this little gearbox, and for every item of text we think we're going to be joining, we can just click, click, click. Let's add a few for now. So what goes next? Well, let me duplicate this, plug it in here. And now what do we want? Well, we want a comma between each of these items. So comma. Then what comes next? The month. Need another comma. Need more space for things to join. Now we need the day. Duplicate that. And finally, instead of a comma, we just need to close the bracket. So it's a little complicated, but I think you'll understand what it's doing. It's joining equals date open bracket with the year from our calendar and a comma to separate them, then the month, then a comma to separate that, then the day, then it's closing the bracket so that it can build this formula here. All right, that's our code. This should work now. The last thing we might want to do is after we input this, maybe we want it to go back to the main screen. So we could just go into control and say, navigate back to screen 1 after inputting something. So let's test it out. Sometimes on the first run, it might not work. So let's give it a go. Here we go. So let's do a salad. Click on that. Details. Caesar salad. Image URL. Let's just go look up a Caesar salad. And images here. Find an image we like. This looks good. Right click. Copy image address. And I'll go back over here to Thunkable. Paste that in. Let's give it cost. Ooh, that's not going to work. All right, we've got to find an image that is ending in JPEG and has a properly formatted URL. So just grab another one here. Try this one. Right click, copy image address. Paste that one in. That one looked good. It ends in .jpeg and starts with an HTTPS. Cost, let's say $8. And we'll say submit. Brings us back to the main screen. So you'll notice it's not there immediately. So what we're going to do is add one more piece of code so that when we jump back to screen 1, the first thing it does is refresh all the content. So how do we do that? I think it's under data sources, and it's either data sources or data list viewer. There it is. So under data viewer list, we're going to refresh our data. So we're going to say screen 1. When screen 1 opens, what do we want to do? We want to refresh our data. So now when I go back to live test, there's our Caesar salad. I can click it, see the details, go back, add another item if I want. Maybe that one's for tomorrow. So it won't appear until tomorrow. But if I look here at my spreadsheet and scroll down, I can see, oh, I've added French onion soup there, Caesar salad, and then French onion soup again for tomorrow. So adding all the data to the spreadsheet exactly how we'd imagine it should. So there's one more step I might want to do here, and that's to be able to grab a picture from my camera roll instead of having to paste a URL in. And in the next video, I'll talk about how you can upload a picture that you either take with your camera or find in your photo roll instead of having to paste a URL, which is easy enough to do on a computer, but kind of annoying to do on a phone.